Hey everybody, welcome to the Mosaic podcast. I can't believe what we've got going on here. We may or we may not come up with some technical difficulties because I am speaking with Bryan and Jen, and they are in the middle off the coast of Grenada on a boat. And I don't think we've ever done a podcast with people off the coast of Grenada on a boat. So this is going to be fun for us. Let me tell you a little bit about who they are, and then what I want to do is tell you about why I have, without ever having met them, this super big man crush on these guys because they are living a life that I dreamed of living. So I love it. Bryan and Jen, Dangerz, and don't forget their dog Karma, the wonder dog, are minimalists, life hackers, and freedompreneurs. Doesn't that sound good? Freedompreneurs. I love that. They're full-time nomads since 2012. That's almost 8 years. They first did a van life. Now they're doing a boat life. And now they're learning how to sail while they're hopping around the Caribbean. They have no real plan for where life is going to take them or a commitment to do what they're going to do. The only decision, their only commitment is to making decisions based on their happiness rather than on money or the accepted norm. When I asked them, what do you want to promote? They said, gosh, I guess there's a lot of things we could promote, but maybe just happiness and love for all. They weren't like trying to sell anything or do anything, and I find that so doggone refreshing in a world today where everybody is trying to sell us something, trying to give us something, trying to teach us something. When I wrote my book, The Mosaic, it's a story about a boy who lost his parents 2 years apart on the same day. And when he asked the adults where his parents were, they told him they were in a place called heaven. And so he set out as a young boy and just took to the road, much like Bryan and Jen are doing, not on a boat, mind you, but just walking. And the people that he met along the way were people that were not your heaven finders in his mind. They weren't the holy men and the priests and the monks and the clergy. They were common, ordinary people. There were a road worker and a blind man and a street artist and a trash man. And when he wondered, why am I here with these people? He thought, well, it doesn't matter why I'm here. I'm just here with them. Let me sit with them and hear what they have to say. And in 100% of the cases, when he left those people, the person he left was completely different than the person he first saw. And when he realized that nothing he saw in life was real until he spent the time with it to see what it was actually saying and could give to him, he met a monk who unzipped the sky and walked him into a parallel reality. Well, I don't know that Bryan and Jen have met a monk who walked them into a parallel reality, but clearly they're living in a different reality than most people. And so I have talked way too much up until this point. So let me just introduce them. Bryan, Jen, welcome to the Mosaic podcast, and thank you so much for being here. How are you today?
We're awesome. We're surrounded by paradise.
You are.
And thank you for having us.
Yes.
It is my absolute honor. What I want to do is, through the course of the podcast, I want to let people know what you're doing, but I want to sort of backtrack it a little bit to get a little history, and then we'll come to the present, and then we'll come, if there's a future, we'll come to that as well, okay? So what I want to know is, like, what did you guys dream of doing when you were kids? What did you say, I'm going to grow up and be what?
Who can remember, Danny? For me at least, there were various things that I fell in love with, wanted to do, and then promptly got talked out of by my parents, by the specialists, by society. And so at some point I ended up doing a bunch of things that I had no desire to do. Mostly in pursuit of money.
So that's already later on. I mean, when I was a kid, I grew up and I thought I wanted to be a table because I didn't know that you couldn't be a table. I thought, I was a little kid and I thought you could be whatever you wanted to be. I'm talking about at the point where you were like the littlest kid where you thought, I want to grow up and be a astronaut or a fireman or a baseball player or a princess or whatever it was. What did you grow up and want to be at that point? What was the first thing you can remember wanting to be?
First thing I can remember being talked out of was an oceanographer. So I wanted to swim with sharks and study things under the water. And
how old were you when you had that memory?
I think I kept that until I actually started researching schools that would give me that education. So midway through high school.
Wow.
I started that very young and then kept it probably through midway through high school.
Wow. Wow. Fabulous. Fabulous. And how about you, Jen?
Well, I think I wanted to have a petting zoo.
I
think my very first career goal. And that was when I was in grade school. It's all really fuzzy back then, the memories, but
right.
Yeah, third grade maybe.
Fabulous. And if you were to look back and people were to say to you, this is what they thought your biggest strength was then, what would they say your biggest strength was as kids?
For me, I guess independence. I was able to cook my own meals, do my own laundry, take myself to school when I was really little. All my friends, they were being chaperoned, but not me.
Well, what's the opposite of that? Because that was probably what I was recognized at. For me, it was probably art. I mean, I didn't have a lot of other self-identification, so I kind of dove into, the fact that I could draw and do art. So I always was the kid walking around with a big piece of art that I was working on at the time.
Fabulous. And when you looked at the world around you, what scared you most about the world? When you saw it, was there something that frightened you? Were you scared about something? Was it like, what did you see when you looked out your window?
Everything.
Everything scared
I think I was terrified by everything for
Wow.
literally for most of my life. Yeah.
Jen, are you just discovering that now? No.
No, it's a funny set of questions for us, Danny. We don't, I don't think either of us kind of takes a lot of stock or strength in our childhood because we feel like we spent too many decades, kind of living a life that others told us we were supposed to live, or trying to fit into holes that, our pegs were supposed to be somehow forced into.
Totally.
And it was only a couple of decades ago where once we met and we started kind of purging all of our belongings and trying to downsize and save money, that one of the things that I think we kind of unintentionally or unknowingly purged was all of that set of ideas that other people had kind of told us what we needed to be. And so in the same way that we kind of were getting rid of all that other weight, one of the weights that kind of lifted off of our shoulders was this expectation to be things that we never felt very comfortable being. And
right.
So that's when we kind of started redefining, who we were without the guise of what we'd been told we were supposed to do.
What do we want? What do we value? What do we want to surround ourselves with? What do we want to rid ourselves of? What do we want to do that we don't actually think we could ever do? Let's go do that.
No, I completely love it. And excuse me if my questions were strange, but I purposely want to try and get people into a place where they're not thinking like they're normally thinking, because I didn't really ask you what did your parents want you to be. I asked you what you wanted to be. So I didn't assume that you were living in a world where people were putting all this stuff on you. I just wanted to know, like, what were you like in the innocence of your childhood before all that stuff comes on? What did you feel? What did you think? How did you believe? And what I love is the way you've turned the conversation, because it's really where I want to talk to you now. Because I would imagine in the group of people that listen to my podcast, there are a lot of people that are nonconformists, but they may not have the courage to step out of the life that they're living because of all the fears that come with, well, how will I survive? What will I do? Where will I find the money? What if I really just give up everything? What will that be like? And so what gave you individually the courage? And did you have that courage before you met? And then you just met and together you gave each other the courage? Or did coming together give you the courage to do it?
This is 100% Jen's department. Much like the answers of what terrified us as children, nothing, everything. You know, I was in a job that was horribly stressful, probably killing me. And she kept trying to talk me into running away. Let's just go, you know, take a sabbatical, find ourselves and be happy. And my answers were very much like what you just said. You know, well, who does that? What about the 401k? What about the savings? What about the plan? What about, you know, getting killed? I don't know, everything. And she just kind of wore me down over, you know, the next few years. And then, you know, pair that with a doctor's appointment that didn't go very well, where they finally pointed out that I needed to be on a huge regimen of high blood pressure medication immediately at, I think, 28 years old.
Wow.
And so I just went home and said, okay, I'm in. You know, I'm not ready to go today. So it'd be great if we could, you know, formulate a plan that might work a little better for my terrified soul. And we had a lot of work to do in terms of getting out of debt and gaining some comfort before I was, you know, actually ready to take that leap with her. But, you know, I married an Oregon hippie and she was never terrified of any of this stuff. It just seemed like second nature to her, thankfully.
And so, you know, first of all, thank you for your honesty. Thank you for the love that I feel from both of you guys. Thank you for, you know, just being straight up with me, because we're complete strangers. We've never had a conversation with each other. We've emailed a couple times. So we're not, for people listening, we're not friends. And to have the ability to be able to be so open about where people are without having ever met, like I'm an imperfect stranger, just talking to you right now from, you know, my home to the middle of, you know, the coast of wherever the heck you are, right? Grenada, Bryan, what did you see in Jen that made you want to be with her? Because it sounds like your lives were very separate. Sounds like the way you thought and the way Jen thought, I mean, we're different, not bad different, but just different. What made you fall in love with her?
Everything. She literally moved in and was the girl next door. And our relationship went from imperfect strangers to inviting her to a barbecue that she never left from to this day.
Wow.
And so I don't think we both needed a lot of work at that point in time. It's fair to say we were both fairly, you know, I don't know, I hate to use the word broken, but we were, you know, both out of pretty long relationships and trying to kind of restructure ourselves. And so other than the fact that we just had to relearn how to be in healthy relationships, I don't think there was anything that I would have changed about her then, and there's nothing I would change about her now.
What a beautiful statement. I mean, just for people who are listening, can you imagine being able to hear that statement from your husband or your significant other or your wife, that there's nothing that I would ever want to change about her then or now? Jen, let me ask the question the other way, because like to someone who's caught in the day-to-day grind and is stressed out and scared of everything, to meet somebody who's free and open and isn't scared of anything, you could see how there would be the attraction there to, like, I would love to be in that freedom. What was the attraction for you being a free, loose, you know, sort of open person to someone who self-admittedly, and if I'm getting this wrong, correct me, but was scared of everything, you know, and was afraid to do it and was set in a certain way? What did you see when you saw him at first?
Well, the first thing I saw were his intense blue eyes.
Thank goodness.
That's what really started it all. It's just it's simple.
Yeah, clearly he's a
but I didn't
good-looking
know-
guy. So,
Yeah. I didn't know he was terrified of everything when we first met. He had a strong, powerful job, and he had these muscles, and he had a ton of friends and a beautiful house, and he liked great food and wine, and he was so different from me. I think really that's what I was drawn to is he had a very vibrant life that as the neighbor I was watching, because I guess I'm a bit of a stalker. First time I've admitted it. Yeah, I think he was very intriguing to me. He was unlike anyone I'd ever met. He was so different from me. But he also, like, I saw him leaving with his friends to go rock climbing and camping, and he'd be gone for a week, and I'd be like, where did cute neighbor go? Like, I had so many questions. I really wanted to get to know this guy.
wow.
And to be fair, Danny, we are still complete polar opposites. Nothing has changed about that at all. I don't think that we haven't done that thing where you start to look like your dog or like we haven't, I don't know that we've melded one person so much as we just kind of admitted at some point that we are we're the perfect partner for this journey, and it works well.
Yeah. So for those of you who aren't seeing the video, what's happening is another boat just pulled by. And I guess there's a courtesy of the ocean that when you pull by a boat, you just yell out, hi, ahoy, we're hungry, or whatever they're doing. And they're here. So if you felt an interruption, that's what it was. I love what's happening here because there's so many people who feel like they have to become one another, or they have to become the versions of the other person want them to be. But somehow for you, the beauty of this is, like, there are two things that I want to unpack. One is the way we see ourselves isn't necessarily the way the world sees us, which is super interesting because Bryan, in saying, like, I was scared of everything, Jen didn't even see that person. She saw something else that was, that was super attractive to her, which I'm sure also. But then the other thing is how two people who can be completely different can come together and be completely whole without losing their differences. You don't have to be something else. And when I think about a mosaic, which is the imagery around my book, the image of, you don't want the pieces to blend into each other. You want the pieces to connect to each other, and the differences that exist in those pieces make the mosaic all that more interesting. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. And I want to add that getting to know Bryan so intensely, so intimately, and seeing how different he is from me gives me a better perspective on everybody else in this world, because we're all completely different beings, and we all really don't know each other until you really get in there, and like much like your book was about, actually.
Yeah. I love that. And so, especially now in a time, like, you're out on a boat. Yeah, I don't know how much connection you have, but I'm sure you hear news or you come into dock and you see things that are going on. But right now, the climate is so egregious. People are fighting. Everybody's fighting. There's nowhere you can turn without people fighting people. If it's political or medical or education or whatever it is, there's relationships. Everybody's fighting each other because everybody cannot accept those differences. So for people that are listening, is there something you could say to them that would help people to just look across at the person they're looking at and just accept them and love them as they are, rather than try and change them?
That's the dream come true. I don't know. It comes from within. I don't know what comes to your mind.
I think it does. A lot of it comes from within, but I will say that this, again, is not something that I think I was born with. I was raised in the Deep South, which is obviously a place where a lot of these struggles are still very much alive and well. And so it was really only, I think, when I met Jen that I started to see, I mean, she just has this deep caring for the world that I've never known in another human. And she, to her deficit, she also typically absorbs a lot of that and has to deal with the struggles that come with that. But for me, it was another one of these learnings that took a lot of time as we spent time together to kind of realize that you never know the struggle that another person is going through. You have no idea what shoes they've walked in. You have no idea what their path has looked like or what led them to where they are, be it good or bad or both. And I think today we still struggle. You know, now we live in this world where, you know, we have been nomadic and living kind of in very tight spaces alone for almost 8 years. And so as we move from place to place and we bounce off of other people's lives, it's interesting the reactions, both, you know, you feel yourself trying to assume something about someone else and you know they're doing the same about you. But having to live in this kind of narrow confine of time kind of forces you to back out of that and realize that you honestly don't know until you ask and until you hear the deeper story. And it's diving into those stories that I think if you do it again and again and again, you start to realize that we're all just humans and we're all just trying to figure this mess out as best we can as we move through it. And, you know, even now as we sit in a little community of boats that we've only known for a few weeks, it's kind of the same thing. And, you know, I write home or talk to friends back home who oddly assume that all the people sitting in the boats next to us either are millionaires or trust fund babies or, you know, got a family inheritance and that's why they're able to live on a boat. And I've caught myself several times having to be like, but you know, we're on a boat and we didn't have any of those, right? Like it's clear to you that, you know, you're still assigning labels just like I would have done before as well. And it's just very hard, I think, it's easier for all of us to make excuses or to make assumptions about other people and why they may have or have not or done or lived things differently than us. And it's a habit. I think it's a habit that either we were taught or it's just too easy to come by and you have to force yourself to give it up.
Well, you know, again, thank you for your honesty, because part of what I think people look at, I mean, I can see it in myself, and I think I'm a fairly free thinker. We like to put things in boxes that we know. Like I'm creating a movement now that's part of a new paradigm that hopefully will make the old paradigm obsolete. But even in the languaging of how you do that, there aren't roads or clear-cut ways to talk about it that people can understand, because everything is within the confines of the way people understand what they're doing. So for people to just give up their life and and travel in a van or travel on a boat or live in a small house or to do the things that you've done, most people think like, what happened? You know, like what could have caused something like that? And they don't have the neat, they want to put it into a box so that they can understand it and tie it up with a nice ribbon so it makes sense to them. So what would you say to the people who want to do what you're doing, but they can't find a box that it fits in because it doesn't? And how do they get the courage to do that? How do they get the courage to leave everything they know for a dream that they have? And in your case, it's worked out because in a small spaces, couples, they have to be really together for them to stay together. I mean, everything that happens, you see each other. There's not a lot that you're with each other 24/7. How does that work?
Terrifically. You want to take this?
But you know what I'm asking? I'm asking because I'm sure people like, in some ways, the dream is to like let go of all the stress and all the chaos, and we're just working harder to have more things that we don't want, so we can work harder to have more things we don't want. And to see people who are not living that way, that have said, I'm going to step out of that game, and I'm going to have what I'm going to make my decisions around my happiness. Am I wrong in assuming that takes a tremendous amount of courage to do?
for you.
It certainly felt that way at the time.
Yeah.
Now, looking back, I have no idea why. I honestly, I mean, I can remember the fear. I can remember, you know, painting a million different scenarios of how wrong everything could go in my mind. But now I look back, and I mean, the beauty is you can always go back, right? I mean, the life that we left, we knew very well and we were very good at. And so at any given point, we could just go back. And so that doesn't seem terrifying in the least from this side of the equation, but from the other side, it was horrifying. I mean, there's nothing short of horrifying.
Yeah.
And so you what would you tell someone? I mean, I have this conversation daily, and I always say the same thing. It's just take a step. A step in any given direction that seems like the right direction that's different than what you're doing. And it's amazing how every one of those steps allows you to see that much further and that much more around you than where you were before. And I honestly believe that for most of us, it's the fear of that first step that makes the entire journey just not happen at all. But if you can just make some move, you know, for us, the move was, you know, deciding instead of buying more of that stuff, we were going to start getting rid of everything we had. And it happened slowly. It was terrifying as well. You know, it'd be one piece, and then it would be one bin, and then it would be an entire room. But that shift allowed us to then start making other shifts. You know, we started having money instead of living in debt. We started downsizing to smaller homes instead of having to buy a bigger home to fit the stuff. Everything started changing, and it was just, I mean, it was really kind of just about that first step, and or just admitting to ourselves that we wanted something else. I think that in and of itself was a pretty good first step.
I remember when we quit our corporate North America jobs in 2012, and we got in our little Volkswagen and we drove to Mexico to go camping for a year or 2 years or whatever was going to happen next on our journey. Bryan was like, what happens if we run out of money and we have to, you know, go back to Oregon and beg for our jobs back? And I was like, what if we want to go back to our jobs? What if something shifts in us and we want to go back to Portland and move back into a house? And, you know, that could happen. Whatever, listening to us as we opened up on this journey, and whatever surfaced, if that's what we went after, that's what I was looking for in the entire, that was the point.
Yeah.
What do we want? We'll do that.
I say something that sounds very similar, and tell me if you think it does as well. That the beauty of the image of a mosaic is wherever piece you are, you're literally one piece away from a whole nother reality, right? And so one decision away, one thought away, one person away, one new idea away. And that when we just have the courage to take a new idea, to look at, like Bryan, how in some ways it's courageous, and another way you had a medical report that says your blood pressure is through the roof at 28 years old, you have to make a change, you know? And so what is that change? Do you have the courage to make that change, or do you have to just continue living the life we've always been living, to continue having the happiness or unhappiness that we've always had? And so were there moments along the way you got scared?
Of course.
I remember, I'll speak to this one. So we were probably a year in, no, we were probably about 8 months in actually. And I just kept telling Bryan, like, the universe will provide, the universe will, you know, show itself to us. And we were about 8 months in, and we were on this beautiful beach in Mexico. And Bryan's like, when's the universe going to show us, Jen? When's the universe give a sign? I'm like, give him a date. I just had to throw something out there because he needed an answer. And so I was like, I forget, March 15 or so. Just totally made it up. He put it on the calendar. And on March 15, he no longer needed an answer. He no longer needed, it made him laugh when he saw it. It was just something he was going through at that moment.
And how far out was March 15th from that date? Do you remember? Was it like 3 months, 1 day, 2 weeks?
It was over a year out. It wasn't the next March 15th. It was, I think,
I
a
got
year and
you.
a half out.
Okay.
Even when we left, I think part of me in the back of my mind. I would never say it out loud at that point. But I knew she was going to be wrong. I mean, I couldn't
Right.
wait for the day that we were returning to Portland. We had no money. We didn't even have enough money to like live in a place while we searched for a job. And I could finally just say, I told you so. I told you this was a horrible, miserable idea. But as it turns out, it wasn't. It was just that first year, which we spent mostly in Baja, just on beaches.
I may have lost you. Are you there still? Hello? Hello? I think I've lost them, and this is the beauty of the internet on a boat in Granada, off the coast of Granada. Are you there, guys? Hello? 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 Well, I think we've lost them. I may have to, they've gone out, so we've lost them for a minute. Hopefully they will come back in and see if they can reconnect. In the meantime, like for listeners listening, what are you imagining happening? Can you even imagine this reality for yourself? Can you even imagine the possibility of something like this happening for you? That what you do on a day-to-day basis, you no longer would have to do. That you could do something entirely, completely different. And that you could take a risk and see and know that somehow with courage and with love and with hope, that you'd find a life that you're scared of is not that scary. So I'm hoping they will come back in. I'm hoping we can re-invite them. I'm going to see if I can invite them back in and see Bryan. There we go. Let's see, I'm emailing them now to see if I can get them in. Okay, so I've emailed them to see. There's the sound of the email going off. And we'll see if they come back in. But this is some of what happens when you are talking to nomads on the road, and they're not even on the road, they're in the ocean. So it's crazy. Let's see if they respond or if they can come back in. We'll give it another couple of minutes. But there's something so, I don't know about you, but there's something so intoxicating to me about this way of life, of taking a look at the way we're living and all the stresses that people have and all the we're running after just trying to find money. We're running after trying to pay our bills. We're running after living a life that we think we have to live, when it's so simple to just be away from it all. To be able to live on a boat or live in a van or minimize the size of what you're doing. And it's fascinating to me. I think it's just like this beautiful, fascinating idea that it doesn't have to be the way we're doing it. We don't have to continue to do what we're doing. We can do something else. And that's so intoxicating to me. I really love it. So I don't see them. So I'm wondering, maybe we'll try and end it now. And then if they come back on, we'll try and rearrange to get them back on. In the meantime, we got some of it. I hope we'll be able to follow up with more soon. Okay, signing out.